Did the death of Andre affect you more than other deaths you've known? What's more than that? It was more than any other passing that, oh God, you were unique. For more than 30 years, wrestling fans have been curious about what really happened between Vince McMahon, the chairman of WWE, and the famous Andre the Giant in his last days. Though there have been rumors that they broke up, McMahon has mostly kept quiet about the facts of his close friends' deaths. What did these two wrestling legends really do to each other? And why has McMahon, who is known for being tough and in charge, found it so hard to talk about the sad memories of losing Andre? Now, after years of rumors, Vince McMahon finally speaks out about the sad days before Andre the Giant died. He shares personal details about their friendship that shed new light on the events. Look at one of the most complicated ties in wrestling. Come with us as we find out what McMahon has been deeply regretting for decades. McMahon, Andre's friendship. Professional wrestling is a world that is always changing. Alliances and plots are always shifting. But Vince McMahon and Andre the Giant were friends for a long time, until it ended. McMahon built his business empire on the backs of many celebrities, but Andre was the one who was most important to him. It has been revealed by multiple people close to the WWE chairman that Andre Rusmov, the eighth wonder of the world, was Vince McMahon's favorite wrestler of all time. Vince McMahon always picked his best people. In the 1990s, Shawn Michaels was his best. The Undertaker became a good friend in the 2000s, but Andre went beyond these relationships. He was not only an asset to the business, but also a highly personal link that went back many generations in the McMahon family. This wasn't just a friendship between a boss and his star employee. It was a family event. Stephanie McMahon, who is Vince's daughter. In an interview, she said that she and Andre grew up together and that she thought of him as one of her best friends. It wasn't unusual for me to have Andre the Giant as my best friend as a child. The friendship between Andre and young Stephanie solidified the Giant's place in the McMahon inner circle and led to a web of personal and business ties that went far beyond the squared circle. The friendship went back to Vince McMahon, Sr., who saw Andre's star potential and worked hard to make him a top attraction. When Vince Jr. took over the company, he treated Andre like a king, just like his father had done before him. During the 1980s wrestling boom, Hulk Hogan was without a doubt WWE's biggest draw, but Andre was still Vince's favorite worker and best friend. Behind the scenes, Andre and Vince took many trips together, stayed up late, and had private times that made their relationship stronger. Bruce Pritchard, a former official for WWE, said that Vince and Andre were the same age and had dates that were pretty close to each other. It wasn't just work. Because of the unique stresses of the wrestling business, they became brothers. Their work together as professionals reached its peak at WrestleMania 3 in 1987, when Andre faced Hulk Hogan in a match that became one of wrestling's most famous. WWE said that a record 93,173 people came to the Pontiac Silverdome to see the show. Andre lost the match, but it cemented his reputation and showed how much McMahon trusted him to deliver at the most important time for the company. Wrestlers who worked with both guys during this time often talk about how Andre was treated extra well by McMahon. The mood changed when Andre walked into a room. Even Vince McMahon, who is known for being very tough, showed a softer side for the gentle giant. Several people said that Andre was one of the few people who could make McMahon change his mind about artistic choices, a privilege that almost never happens in the very strict WWE structure. Respect for each other was what made the relationship truly special. Even though Andre had a lot of choices for work and was very good at drawing people in, he stayed loyal to the McMahons. In turn, Vince made sure that Andre was treated with respect, even though his size made things harder. Custom transportation, specially reinforced rings, and careful booking choices were all examples of how much McMahon cared about his friend and prized talent. Few people knew how much Vince looked out for Andre behind the scenes, keeping him away from the stresses of fame and making him seem more mysterious. In contrast to today's wrestling world, where people are constantly exposed to social media, McMahon planned Andre's few visits to keep the giant's air of being larger than life. This kept his popularity and his pride as his health got worse. Because they were so close, what happened in their last years was even more sad. It was a tragic fall apart that would haunt Vince McMahon for decades. Signs of trouble. Vince McMahon and Andre the Giant's once unbreakable bond didn't appear overnight. Like Andre's slowly getting worse disease that followed him around as an adult, the decline happened slowly at first and was hard to ignore until it was too late. By the late 1980s, Andre's acromegaly, the condition that made him so big, was hurting his body more and more. Andres went from being a quick athlete in his youth to a man who was in constant pain because of a disease that makes the pituitary gland make too much growth hormone. Former wrestlers say they saw Andres grimace with each step as he tried to hide how painful it was for him to move backstage. Paul the Butcher Vachon, a wrestling organizer, saw that he kept getting bigger, which is what killed him. His joints got weaker because of his huge size. He had to hide a brace in his underwear to support his back, and just walking became a pain. People who knew both men say that McMahon became more worried about these changes as Andre pushed himself to keep producing. As Andre's health got worse, it was inevitable that his mood would change. He used to be friendly and generous, especially with friends like Vince McMahon, but he became more irritated and distant. Longtime WWE workers saw the Giant's mood swings, which many thought were caused by his worsening health and the alcohol he drank to dull the pain. Wrestler Leo Burke remembered, "When you were his friend, he would go out of his way for you." That positive attitude started to fade, though, as Andre's pain got worse. McMahon was devastated to see his friend's health get worse, especially since Andre had to keep up with his crazy schedule of public events because of his job. This conflict between Andre's health needs and WWE business needs grew and caused more problems. Andre had a lot of freedom and flexibility with his schedule when Vince McMahon was in charge. He often took time off between shows. When Vince Jr. took over, though, he made the touring plan more difficult, so Andre had to show up more often, and made it harder for him to move around the world like he used to. Former WWE employees say that Vince and Andre had private talks about schedule, with the Giant becoming more and more against the hard travel demands that made his physical pain worse. Even though they were able to work out their differences without a fight, they were the first real problems in their relationship and were a sign of the bigger problem that was to come. As Andre's ability to move around got worse, McMahon was in a tough spot. The WWE chairman was torn between his business sense, which told him that Andre would always be attractive, and his personal worry for his friend's health. People who knew McMahon say that he started suggesting change jobs that would keep Andre in the spotlight while reducing the amount of physical work he had to do. These proposals were made with good intentions, but they weren't always well accepted. Andre had built his reputation on being the unbeatable Giant, and he was very proud of the fact that no one could beat him. Bruce Pritchard said that talks about Andre's prospects got more tense because the Giant wouldn't accept any suggestion that he couldn't keep doing what he was doing. There was less and less talk between the two. Once, they would talk about business and personal issues for hours on end. But over time, their meetings became more formal and less common. Wrestlers from that time remember that Andre spent more time alone and often went to his private changing room instead of hanging out with McMahon and other performers like he used to. By the early 1990s, it was clear that things were going badly. Andre's ring efforts, which used to be amazing despite his size, got less and less impressive. Because of his physical limits, matches had to be carefully planned around them, and he had to make fewer appearances. McMahon was always very picky about the standard of WWE products, and it was hard for him to balance his friendship with Andre with his plans for the future of the company. The changes in how WWE presents matches made these problems worse. As the company moved toward faster-paced matches with more athletic players, Andre's slow style and limited mobility seemed to go against the direction of the product more and more. People close to both men could feel the growing gap between Andre's skills and McMahon's artistic vision. even though it was never said out loud. These growing pressures were bound to reach a breaking point that would change the relationship between two of wrestling's most famous figures for good. When they fought, before the early 1990s, Vince McMahon and Andre the Giant had been friends for decades, but in those early years, the sad truth of Andre's physical decline could no longer be ignored or worked around. Several people who knew them personally say that McMahon finally brought up the subject that they had been trying to dodge for a while. Leaving work, wrestling reporters who covered WWE in the early 1990s said that Andre was clearly past his best. They noticed that he was clearly in a lot of pain, even though he was still performing sometimes. Because McMahon was worried about his friend's failing health, he is said to have told Andre that he should quit wrestling because it is so hard on the body. No matter how well-meaning the idea was, it felt like a betrayal to the proud giant. Even though Andre's health was getting worse, he still wanted to act, maybe even needed to. According to people who know Andre, he saw McMahon's idea not as worry, but as the WWE chairman deciding that he was no longer useful to the company. The fight between McMahon and Andre got very bad because of this. The tension wasn't just about Andre's future in wrestling, it went to the heart of their friendship as a whole. The argument got worse than just having different opinions. People said things that they couldn't take back. Professional wrestlers who were around during this time say it got colder whenever both men were in the same building. The friends, who used to be inseparable, kept a business distance from each other and often sent messages to each other through middlemen. In 1992, Andre decided to quit WWE for good, which was the big break he needed. This departure wasn't just about breaking a contract. It was also a message about the person. After years of being loyal to the McMahon family, Andre decided to show his freedom by taking charge of his remaining wrestling career. This may have been the only way left for him to do so. Many wrestling historians think that their last act of defiance, which ended their relationship, was to work for rival companies that same year. Japan and Mexico were places where he did shows, and people there always treated him well. For fans in those areas, seeing Andre, even when he wasn't in great shape, was still a special event. He was able to keep acting on his own terms, without McMahon's worried but controlling influence, thanks to these appearances. Next came the event that hurt Vince McMahon the most. But Andre the Giant, the eighth wonder of the WWE, showed up on TBS, which is owned by Ted Turner, who is McMahon's worst enemy. Andre made what would be his last American TV debut at Clash of Champions 20 on September 2, 1992. It wasn't for WWE, but for World Championship Wrestling, or WCW. Even though the appearance was short, just a few seconds for an interview during the show's celebration of 20 years of wrestling on TBS, it had a huge symbolic meaning. Back in Stamford, Connecticut, Vince McMahon is said to have been deeply hurt by the news. Bruce Pritchard says that Vince felt cheated by Andre. This short appearance was important not because of what it said, but because it showed that one of wrestling's most important personal ties had ended in public. McMahon was really hurt by the showing because it wasn't just about business competition. Over the years, WCW had hired a lot of former WWE stars, but Andre was different. He was more than just a past worker. He was family. A reliable friend whose appearance on Arrivals felt like an insult to me personally. Soon after this appearance, the two guys stopped talking to each other completely. People who know both of them say that they did not talk on the phone. There were no moves to make peace. The proud giant and the proud salesman couldn't agree on what to do to heal the rift. They were both waiting for the other to take the first step. The worst part of their story happened because they didn't talk to each other for a long time. McMahon would feel bad about it for decades to come. Andre the Giant's last days. The last part of Andre the Giant's life happened away from the wrestling rings where he was famous. By the end of 1992, Andre's health had gotten a lot worse. His motion was very limited, and his close friends noticed that it was getting harder and harder for him to do even simple things. The Giant used to be surprisingly quick for his size, but now he needed canes to walk because his body was giving out on him more and more every day. Even though his health was getting worse, Andre kept fighting occasionally in Japan, teaming up with Giant Bubba in All Japan Pro Fighting. To win his last match, which happened on December 4th, 1992, just 7 weeks before he died, he worked with Bubba and Russia Kimura. Not many people knew that this normal tag match in a Japanese theater would be Andre the Giant's last show ever. Even though Andre had spent most of his adult life moving, he had always kept in touch with his home country of France. He heard the sad news that his father had died in January 1993. Even though his health was getting worse, Andre made the hard trip across the Atlantic to be at the funeral. Friends say that the trip was very hard on his body and that he had to make special travel plans because of his size and health concern. Andre chose to stay longer in France after the funeral so he could spend more time with his mother on her birthday. Andre did something very normal in the afternoon on January 27, 1993, the day before he died. In France, I played cards with old friends. With friends who saw him as Rusmov instead of a wrestling draw, this simple pleasure, a game of cribbage, gave Andre a rare moment of normalcy in a life dominated by his huge size. Andre had gone out with friends the night before and then gone back to his hotel room. He stayed at the Hôtel de la Tremoille in Paris so he could rest before going to see his family again. When Andre went to sleep that night in his hotel room, he had no idea it would be his last. Andre the Giant passed away in his sleep early in the morning of January 28, 1993. He was 46 years old. Officially, he died of congestive heart failure, which was caused by his uncontrolled acromegaly. His body was found by his chauffeur and hotel staff in the afternoon, when he didn't show up for a meeting. The huge heart that had been powering his huge body had finally given out. In a strange way, while he was back in the country where he was born. When word got out that Andre had died, it spread quickly through the wrestling world. Not having the internet back then, news spread more slowly than it does now. When the news spread through WWE, they were having a press conference to talk about WrestleMania 9 in Las Vegas. The moment Vince McMahon heard the news is still a turning point in his life. Bruce Pritchard says that the news hit the WWE boss hard. Even though they haven't talked in years, the link they built over decades couldn't be broken. McMahon was shocked by more than just the news that Andre had died. Many people thought he would die soon because of his illness, but he died before they could settle their differences. At that time, people close to McMahon say the usually calm WWE chairman showed a rare sign of weakness. He was shocked when he realized there would be no reconciliation and no last talk with his longtime friend. Reports say that when McMahon heard the news, he took some time to be alone to process his feelings before going back to work. The body of Andre was flown back to the United States with his close friend Jackie Bernard. The last will and testament of Andre said that he should be burned within 48 hours of his death. The French crematoriums, on the other hand, couldn't take him because of the way they were set up. He had to go back to America because of this. His ashes, which were said to weigh 17 pounds, were spread out at the ranch he loved in Allaby, North Carolina. This was the only place in his crazy life where he felt calm and normal. At the service on the ranch, Hulk Hogan gave Andre's eulogy. A lot of famous wrestlers, like Macho Man Randy Savage, Mae Young, and Vince McMahon himself, went to the funeral in the United States. McMahon went to pay his respects to the man who had played a big role in WWE rise to fame, even though they still had problems. While the wrestling world mourned the death of one of its most famous figures, Vince McMahon had to deal with a difficult mix of sadness and regret. He felt things that would keep him up at night for decades, and they finally made him talk about the last days before Andre the Giant died. Ending the silence, Vince McMahon kept quiet about the painful end of his friendship with Andre the Giant for almost 25 years. The head of WWE, who built a fortune by controlling stories, didn't seem to be able or willing to talk about this particular one. In 2018, when HBO documentary simply called Andre the Giant came out, the first big crack in that mask showed. The video changed McMahon's mind about how open he was about talking about his complicated feelings about Andre. People saw Vince McMahon's emotional weakness for the first time on TV, which not many people had ever seen. The usually calm WWE chairman's eyes filled with tears as he thought about his friendship with Andre, of not going on. This is what happened. A stunning show of feeling from a man who is known for keeping his cool under pressure. In this brief glimpse into McMahon's mental state, the deep feelings he had been hiding for years became clear. Still, the documentary only touched on the surface of their complicated relationship. McMahon spoke briefly and emotionally about the end of their friendship. The full story of how they got into a fight and McMahon's regret was mostly left out. In interviews for the documentary, McMahon briefly talked about how painful it was to lose Andre without being able to make peace, but he quickly went back to talking about the Giant's business accomplishments and contributions to wrestling. For years, when he did talk about Andre in public, he always followed this pattern. He would be emotionally open, then quickly move on to safer business ground. After that, there were a number of more telling events. In 2022, on what would have been Andre's birthday, McMahon wrote on social media that his friend had been a once-in-a-lifetime talent. People who had watched McMahon's career knew how important it was that they acknowledged their friendship in public, using language that put more emphasis on the personal connection than the professional relationship. When Netflix's documentary series Mr. McMahon came out in 2024, it was the biggest step forward, which caught McMahon being completely honest about his friendship with Andre in a way that had never been seen before. In live, uncut video, Vince McMahon finally spoke out about the painful days before Andre the Giant died. He told everyone how sorry he was that they still had a disagreement. In the documentary, McMahon stated, "I don't remember exactly when the last time was that I talked to Andre." His voice was unusually soft. "I'm able to forget about bad things." Even though he said this, the look on his face showed that he didn't believe it. Those memories weren't lost. They were hidden deep and now coming to the surface. For the first time, McMahon talked about the fight openly, admitting that he had pushed for Andre to retire because he was worried about his health getting worse. "Andre wasn't just another wrestler to me," McMahon said in what was probably his most open moment on camera. "Andre wasn't just good for business or a draw. I thought of him as family, but I let him down when he needed me to understand what wrestling meant to him and who he was. I thought that telling him to quit would help him, but it took away the one thing that still gave him meaning." McMahon's public story changed a lot when he admitted that he had been wrong about what wrestling meant to Andre's sense of self. McMahon was admitting that he had made a basic mistake in how he had handled his friend's problem. For decades, he had been portrayed as the smart businessman who always made the right choice. "I was right about how healthy he was. A few months later, he died. I was wrong about how to help him," McMahon said in later talks. The documentary also showed how McMahon felt when he heard that Andre was going to be on WCW. He said that it had felt personal, even though he knew it probably shouldn't have. He told him that his pride had stopped him from calling him because he hadn't been able to swallow it. "Why? I was shocked by what I heard. I'm not really a sensitive person. It was too late to make things right by the time he heard the person had died." The fact that McMahon was ready to talk about these painful memories was a big change from how he usually acts in public. The WWE head finally spoke out about his feelings that had been bothering him since 1993, after avoiding talking about them in detail for decades. Journalists and scholars who study wrestling pointed out how important McMahon's honesty was. For a man whose success depended on always appearing sure of himself, these admissions of regret and failure were a big change.